So please have a seat. So this is time for you, your opportunity to ask questions or things you want to discuss.
And just Meadow, shall we see you again when you depart these doors?
I don't know.
We'll get you a coach.
Please don't. Yeah, all the news is all about the Pope.
Actually, I've been caught up quite a bit with watching the Pope, and this morning there was an interview about him, and someone asked, because it's a Cardinal Newman beatification today, and the question was what attracted Pope Benedict to Cardinal Newman. One was the scholarship, one was flow of language, use of words, his writing, and one was, this is what he said, the quest for truth is not served by private opinion, and I thought it resonated well with your talk. I thought it was just like it. And he looked very frail, very humble, and
I think he's quite a shy person, actually. Yeah. And he has a terrible reputation. He was before he was a Pope. He was Cardinal Ratzinger, and then he's known as the what do you call it? The Rottweiler of the Vatican. But it's interesting because he's quite, he was chosen, he's quite elderly, and that's a very difficult job, I should think, being Pope. I wouldn't want to be Pope. And when you're 80, who wants to, that's why I'm retiring, so I find it just being abbot of Amaravati is too much for me. Yes?
I'm trying to think, so could you comment on the role of fear in providing a background to sort of karmically unhelpful, karmically negative actions by word or deed, speech, where we get drawn in perhaps to not being completely honest or doing things which have some sort of negative karmic consequences, and we're sort of drawn into that through fear. We fear we're going to lose something, or the structure of our life might be damaged, our sense of security might be compromised. I don't know if that makes sense, what I've just said.
Well, that's where, fear is it's a primal emotion, a survival mechanism, really. That's common to all creatures. So it's not like, where we tend to see it as some kind of personal weakness. But, I was brought up with the idea that if you're a real man, you're not afraid. The John Wayne fearless. And so then you felt, because you did it, you were frightened that there was something wrong with you. But in terms of when you contemplate this realm, this human condition, and this planet, and nature itself, I mean, it's a fear. It's all, animal realm is all about fear, survival, and that's where, the human realm, we can, like I was saying, agree to not intentionally kill each other, so that means that on a certain level, we've managed to get rid of the dangerous animals. There's no bears tromping into Amravati, or lions or tigers, or raging elephants. So where at one time, not all that long ago, you had to build fortress-like villages. You go to Italy or Portugal, where they have villages that are on top of hills with walls, around them, like fortresses, to protect themselves from bandits and raiding tribes and from wild animals. So there's a lot to fear, just primordially, really. But and then our fears are oftentimes around, very not from basic fear of being eaten by a lion or whatever, but it's about anxiety about what people think, or what somebody thinks of me, or losing my position, or whatever. So we have, in a society that has a lot of security in terms of human agreements and laws, and then we have punishments for disobeying laws and committing crimes. But there's still, fear is a primal emotion that we all share, and then, as I said before, there's a lot to be frightened of. Because we live in a realm where, you look out at the universe at night, and on a clear night, and it's rather, it's almost scary, because it's, in its magnificence, it's so vast, and who knows what's out there. All the forces and vibrations and energies, and how things affect each other. Are we, like the sun itself, we just take for granted, but, the sun goes out, we die instantly. We're dependent on things like the sun, and things happening in the ways that we can, survive in. But also, there's the possibility of them ceasing, or climate change, or floods, or what's happened in Pakistan. Probably the worst flood ever recorded in the history of any country. Where did that come from? And these, it wasn't, who can you blame for it, and whatnot? Is, it's India, or you want to blame somebody, but actually it's just a natural phenomena that happened. And then there's so many possibilities of being maimed or hurt, or in some way damaged by just the forces around us. So and then we take it personally. We come from the ideal that we shouldn't be afraid, or that it's some kind of neurotic personal problem. But I'm trying to present it as a kind of primal condition that being born into this realm you get from just being born here. It's not personal. It's not your fault. And then we begin to and then we can deal with fear. And if we do a lot of things that are harmful, if we're selfish and deceitful and exploit others and take advantage of them, then we have a lot to fear just from the amount of enmity, hatred, and resentment that we create by our own heedlessness and selfishness. And that, like people that like the mafia and criminal gangs and that, they have to live with bodyguards and Rottweilers and burglar alarms and all this kind, so because there's so much to fear. I mean, it's not just that they're neurotic, they do, people want to kill them. Fortunately, I've never never done anything that bad to where I'm looking out for enemies and they're about to kill me. Knock on wood. But then recently they had the man that killed John Lennon made a confession. I think he's out of prison now, and he served his time. And they asked him why he did it, and he said, because he thought if he killed John Lennon, he'd become famous. And he also was planning to kill Elizabeth Taylor. And so she must be frightened sometimes. He doesn't even know her. But he could become famous through killing her. I mean, some people are so, crazy, thinking that fame, what kind of fame is that? But also the society is one, celebrity becoming a name that goes down in history, whether, you're a notorious criminal or a serial killer or the most vicious human being ever that we ever remember in history is some kind of, perpetuating some kind of fame, but it's must come from somebody who's really, terribly confused, and so and then like the Buddhist meditation is you're letting go of this ego that wants acknowledgement or feel, like you can get perspective on your own tendencies to want things that other people own or to intentionally deceive or take advantage of others. You begin, we all have tendencies in these directions. Sometimes it's just expedient to tell a lie or to deceive somebody in some way, to get something you want from them or whatever, or to plot to put somebody down so you can get their position in the office, or I mean, that's what melodramas are about, soap operas. About the deceit and criminal tendencies, and then the fear that comes from that. Like Macbeth, the Shakespeare play. I mean, that's brilliant exploration of power. Wanting power, and then murdering the King Duncan, getting the power, becoming King of Scotland, and then going absolutely bonkers with fear and paranoia. And they had to kill Banquo, and then killing off everybody. And Lady Macbeth is, one of the arch villains, and she killed herself. She went crazy. And that's a good, that's a kind of plot that is, that's a brilliant play, but it also says a lot about, this ambition for prestige, for becoming king, and using criminal means to get to the position. And then once you're king, somebody wants to kill you. So you live in a realm of fear because you got the position through immoral means and criminal, deceitful actions. And then what have you got when you are king? You're sitting on a throne with a crown, scared out of your wits, suspecting everybody of plotting against you. And so it's, that's because of you have done it yourself. And that's why, it's very important to see that, like telling a lie, if I tell you a lie, and then it might be nobody will ever know. Maybe you believe me, and nobody ever questions it, but I know. And then I have a conscience. So when I told a lie, and I know that I've told a lie, then I and you may think, oh, Ajahn Sumedho said this. Never question it. But I go back to my kuti, and I know I've told a lie. And that hangs around. It hangs, like a bad odor just keeps you circling around you. And then it brings up the kind of, way that we deal with lies and the memory. We have to remember it. So even though I might have, got what I wanted through telling a lie, when I get what I want through immoral means, is it worth it? Is it, because I'm stuck with this memory. And so, like this interesting, and I was in Canada last June, and my father was born in British Columbia. He's Canadian, so I have cousins living in British Columbia, and my father was born in this town called Chilliwack, which is not far from Vancouver. And then, and he grew up, he emigrated to the States, to Seattle. So, and he was traveling across from Ajahn Virdemo's place near Ottawa, across to Vancouver, and then meeting these cousins, and there's a branch monastery in British Columbia, and the head monk there's Ajahn Sona, who invited me to visit his place, very beautiful place, but before I went to see Ajahn Sona, I met my cousin, who told me that he's 81 years old, this cousin of mine, and he told me that when he was in high school in Chilliwack, his car broke down, and he needed to repair it, so he borrowed $20 from one of his friends, promising to pay it back, and then he never did. And he was telling me that they had, a couple of years ago, they had a class reunion in Chilliwack. And so he was dreading going to because of this memory. He must have been about 17, 18 years old, and now he's 81 or 80. And he kept thinking, what if I meet this person, that I promised to pay back $20, and $20 in those days was quite a lot of money, and I never did. So he was worried about it, he told me, and then he went to the class reunion, and this man came up to him, and my cousin thought, oh no, what am I going to say? And instead, this man said, you're related to Ajahn Sumedho. And he said all evening long he kept pursuing him, asking my cousin about Ajahn Sumedho. So then I went to see Ajahn Sona, and I found out Ajahn Sona's father was the one that my cousin borrowed $20. Well, has that ever happened to you, where some stupid error or mistake or action that happened long ago, and you fear meeting that person again because you remember maybe this man, Ajahn Sona's father, didn't even mention the $20. He's probably forgotten about it. Did you have a question?
Yes. Once you end delusion, what would you perceive the world to be like?
Well, it's, in Buddhist terms, the thing that this path gives you is perspective. And the world that we create out of habit is no longer the important world, and we see through it. But we can still operate in it. So it's like what Ajahn Chah was always using the words like Samuti Satcha, Paramatta Satcha, or Paramatta Satcha is ultimate truth, ultimate reality. Samuti Satcha is conventional reality. So like cultural, the culture we're living in and the positions we have and on this is convention. And so we don't throw that out. But our relation to conventional reality is no longer grasping it. So we can operate within the society, in the structure, in the family, but it's no longer seen in the same way that we see it from the personal identity, the critical mind, the isolated self, the lonely self, and the fear of the future. So it gives you a kind of, you say it's all fearlessness. You realize that no matter what happens, in terms of your karma in life, of old age and loss and the expected things that come to any individual as we have to live through our lifespan, and that we can worry about what will happen to me if I get Alzheimer's disease. Where do you go when you die? Where do you go to, and so forth. All these kind of questions on a personal level, a cultural level. But then in terms of one's insight into the deathless reality on Paramatta Satcha, then you realize all that dies is just the forms that were born. And you're really connected again in a very clear way with the deathless, with Paramatta Satcha. So then that fear that's generic to this realm of just the human body, human individual surviving on a planet, is no longer your reality. It's a kind of fearlessness or confidence, and that you recognize that's your true nature, by letting go of all the conditions, not denying or getting rid of them, but no longer grasping, holding, and just, caught in the momentum of changing conditions that we all have to experience through the body and through the mind. It's different, I think this is a brilliant paradigm. I think this is about as good as you can get in words. Is this, this teaching? There is the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned, and so then there's a statement. This is in the scriptures, and it's a statement as a fact. It's not supposition or philosophical theory or anything. It's a statement of fact. There is the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. Now notice. You can imagine what that is with your thinking mind. You can't create a form for the unformed or a condition for the unconditioned. Other than you'd say, looking bewildered by it because you can't figure it out with the thinking mind. You understand conceptually maybe the word, but like with forms, you can always fantasize or create imaginary forms. And then the way we perceive things, we perceive things and we fix them like this is a cup, and so whenever we see this form, we say this is a cup, and so it's fixed in our memories and our society. Everybody here I say, what is this? And they say that is a cup. But in terms of, because it's an agreed way of relating to this form and its use. But, then, if you go to some other place where they perceive it maybe as something else, as a vase or something, and that would be culturally conditioned, how we perceive this form. This doesn't say what it is. This cup doesn't say I'm a cup. I say, this is a cup. I mean, this is so obvious, but pointing to that the conditioning of the mind is the conditioning sets in, that cups are like this and things are like this and have to be like this and that's wrong and that's right and this is a good cup or a bad cup. But in terms of, and then we have our own, this is my cup or it's not my cup. But in terms of this moment from an empty conscious position, I can still, the scene is still present. It is what it is. And I'm getting this sense of, just not naming it, not projecting anything onto it. So it's in a stillness of consciousness, this form. And then I say, this is a cup. Where if I don't do things like this, then I just take it for granted this is a cup. And that's the way we do with life, with the way we relate. We see somebody and he's like this and she's like that, and then when we see them, we know she's like this and he's like that. And from a memory or a fixed perception and memory that we have of that person. So then we perceive things through habit, and then the kind of attributes and that come from that perception without mindfulness or wisdom informing us, we tend to operate, like he's like this, and he said that to me 20 years ago, and so I don't want to talk to him. I'm just no use for him. Or like my cousin, what am I going to? Because he fixed that this Ajahn Sona's father was still remembered with maybe resentment, or saying, okay, cough up the $20. It's probably, you should pay $500 now. And that's what you dread. But so this fixed idea, I didn't keep my word, carried through from 17 to 81. And then when he saw that person, then that was what came up in his mind. But in terms of conventional reality, that's a convention. This person was my schoolmate, 70 years ago and so forth. But and really, the reality is it is what it is, and that my reaction to dreading meeting this person from my memory of 70 years ago is like this. Then of course that through time there's, my cousin remembered, but this other man wasn't interested in that. But you see, I'd met Ajahn Sona's father before in Thailand, so I knew him. And of course, my father was from Chilliwack, and he was from there. So there was, and so there's a connection, on the of ancestry of Canadian being, the Canadian connection, and then, and that's how it works. That's how we create these different problems and worries and regrets. And then in terms of pure awareness, then these memories come back, but we're no longer creating them into a problem. They're what they call vipaka karma, or the karma, the results of karma of the past arising in the present. And then your relationship to it is knowing it, recognizing, but your abiding place is not grasping or rejecting, but in knowing through this. And then your responses to the situation, if meeting this man again, is you have a way of responding in an appropriate manner, without coming from some bias or fear that you or shame or guilt that you, because of past action, that you create in your mind without any perspective on, without seeing it. So like in the scriptures, Angulimala was this serial killer. And he collected fingers, the kind of ghoulish character, and killed people, cut off a finger and wore this necklace of fingers. And then he saw the Buddha and said, I want, the Buddha's finger. So he chased after the Buddha, and the Buddha, through this, said, he said, no matter how fast Anguli ran, he never could keep up with the Buddha. And the Buddha said, made this comment, something about I'm still, but you're running. And so Angulimala became a disciple of the Buddha and became an arahant. So a serial killer becomes an arahant. He should be, given capital punishment, according to our way of thinking. But then of course, the vipaka karma of that was that wherever he went, people remembered. There's Angulimala, run, or they'd throw things at him, and Angulimala could respond as this is his vipaka karma from having killed so many people, and so he could deal with that, respond to contingencies appropriately. But because of his reputation of his serial murdering in the past, that's what people perceived him to be, not as an arahant, but the very here comes Angulim, run for your lives kind of. That's a good example of how even an arahant has vipaka karma. And then the story of the Buddha in the scripture also. He's, had to go through all kinds of onerous experiences of being blamed and jealousies and that were part of his vipaka karma, as that he could respond to in appropriate ways. So that's what we have. To see this as we have to live our life through, and whatever our karma might be. You don't know the future, how healthy you'll be, or how long you'll live, or what's going to happen. But and then if we don't have perspective on it, then we tend to worry about it, be anxious about the possibilities of sickness, loss, pain, humiliation, physical pain, disease, and that we might have before we die. But in terms of pure awareness, paramatta satya, then we have perspective on whatever happens. So it's not like you're bypassing old age, sickness, and death, but your it gives you the way of relating to it, that through wisdom rather than through fear. Yes?
I was watching Richard Dawkins' program. He thinks we're all deluded. But he brought a good point up that religion, in opposition to science, would say things like stem cells, where you would use a stem cell to try and cure something like motor neuron disease, which is a living hell for somebody. But in order to do that, you have to kill a lower form of life. So religion says you can't do that. What would your opinion be on that?
This is the moral dilemma of the time. It's like, because there's so many different ideas about using these like stem cells and there's so many reasons to, moral reasons, and there's also practical reasons to use them. So this is, for me, I resolve the problem by by taking on the moral reasons. But in terms of, what if I get some disease that can be cured through stem cells? See, I don't have any problem yet. But what if the only cure for some ailment I acquire can only be resolved through some kind of sacrifice like that? Or what if a hingsako should get some kind of terrible disease, and the only way we can do it is through stem cells? What'll I do? And I don't know. I don't really know what I'd do, but I would be aware of the dilemma, and then I'd decide, then I think what the appropriate decision would come. Not through some hard line approach, but, as you trust your intuition more, then you're more responsive to contingencies, rather than operating always from some law or rule, and not that you go by without questioning it or taking into the special conditions or the contingencies. So you need the moral rule, generally that's a guideline for action and speech, like the 5 precepts or something. And then but then we can cling to those 5 precepts blindly, and so then we're always confronted with some kind of condition where generally speaking, the 5 precepts are easy enough to keep, at least for a monk. But then there's other things happen. What would I do? But I don't really know what I'd do. But I'd have that in my consciousness, the moral position, in terms of the tradition and the agreement. Then in terms of the situation at hand, that would be included, that would be part of it, and it wouldn't be, but it would also, there's intuition operating through that, and then you can respond in a suitable way. And I trust that, that because when you're just attached to principles, you become very rigid. And then if you think, well, for that case, just take, what you feel, save the life of somebody is more important than, and then so you have a more liberal kind of generous attitude, and you have very strict principle like Pope Benedict, and no way. So those are the 2 extremes, very liberal and just change with no moral principles are necessary, just follow your heart. Or you break the precept in any way to the slightest degree, it's damnation. So then this is where the mindfulness comes in to develop this sense of a response to a particular situation that you have to make a decision about. So it's like in New Zealand, for example, I was there last December, and the monastery there in the Stokes Valley near Wellington, Ajahn Tirudhammo. The last time I was there before December was about 15 years before, when Ajahn Wajira was the head monk there, and you see they have a problem in New Zealand with the possums who destroy the wildlife. So, like, New Zealand didn't have any mammals in it before. So when human beings started invading, the Maoris and then the British and so forth, they brought all these like rats and cats and dogs, and New Zealand only had bird life, you see, so they had no mammals. They brought in possums from Australia, and they wanted to breed possums there to make fur coats. So anyway, the possums went, there was no natural enemy to the possum in New Zealand, so they just bred, and they were very destructive. So the monastery in Stokes Valley, everything was just like pathetic, these beautiful ferns that grow in New Zealand and all that, they were demolished, and the monastery looked rather barren, and because the monks wouldn't allow anybody to come in and exterminate the possums, because we can't kill anything. So all the possums from the other areas gravitated to the monastery. So Ajahn Majir and I decided to go around chanting the Metta Pavanas, Metta Sutta, and then we had to, please, control your breathing. Possums don't have, don't follow these benevolent requests. And so then Ajahn Tiradhammo was there, and the health authorities came in and said we have to exterminate the possums. It's the law. So Ajahn Tiradhammo, didn't contend it because it would be worthless to do so. So they killed the possums, exterminated the possums. So when I went there last December, the monastery looked beautiful, luxuriant. And these beautiful palms and everything with ferns, and everything looked like beautiful tropical jungle of New Zealand type flora. And I didn't see one possum. So I asked Ajahn Tiradhammo how he felt, and he said, he felt, about the possum, the killing wasn't, but he said in the wrong, he feels pretty good because because they were destroying other things, and what are the moral dilemma there? What should they have done? Stood at the gate and shot anyone who came in, I mean, these are, what do we do in situations like that? And that, Ajahn Tiradhammo was relying on his intuitive awareness rather than a fixed position. And it was following the law and also reflecting on the forest itself, which was being destroyed. And then his own moral position and his relationship as a Buddhist monk to the society, and also thinking of the society and their needs. So these are, now how do you resolve all that? You can rationalize endlessly and be caught in always never being quite sure what to do. Or I trust this intuition, just going into a state of awareness of the different things affecting me. And then the answer, will come, will arise on its own without an arbitrary choice. I trust that.
Hluang Po said the same story about the ants.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw this myself in Thailand, which is one big anthill. Never saw so many ants in my life as in Thailand. And so, but every year at Wat Papong, where Ajahn Chah lived, there were two kinds. There were black ants and red ants. And every year they had a war with each other. So during a certain time of the year, the black ants and the red ants would fight each other. So there'd be ant corpses all over the monastery. It's like a battlefield. But in this way, it was a balance of nature, so that neither red ants nor black ants could dominate the scene, and so it was manageable for everybody, to live there. The ants, there were a lot of them, but they were never really a problem. Then one year, I remember the red ants didn't come, and I don't know what happened to them, but the black ants took over the monastery, and they didn't have any predators. And the black ants had a nasty sting to them. And so, and they were everywhere. In our kutis, you'd hang your robe up and they'd crawl up in your robe, your loincloth, you put it on, and after a few times you have to check it first, see there's none of these stinging ants in it. And monks began to leave the monastery. It was and we're not supposed to kill anything. So, it was making the place unlivable, but nobody knew what to do. And then the army came in one day and sprayed all the ants. And so when I saw that happening, I rushed over to Ajahn Chah's kuti and said, "The army's killing the ants." And he smiles and says, "Yes." He says, "If you don't want them to spray your kuti, you better go and tell them." I didn't. Yes?
You touched on my question before when you said it must be difficult for the Pope to do his job, and you wouldn't like to do his job. But in the job you've had here over the last few decades, you've had your own difficulties, not least resisting the urge to kill some of the monks. But at the same time, creating or being instrumental in making Amaravati here, for us all to be here in the Jordan. It's a thing of the world. It's a physical thing. At the same time as doing that, and all the difficulties that will have caused you, you've also progressed your spiritual path, your meditative path. And that's a problem that faces lots of people. Doing the two things in a balanced way, for one to inform the other, to actually progress on both paths of life. It's very difficult. Have you any?
Yeah, because it's like when I came here, I only had 10 years as a monk, and as a bhikkhu, and then I, was coming to, and we lived in London for 2 years, so you're coming out of the Thai forest into a huge city that you've never lived in, and you're coming in as a Buddhist monk into a culture that's not Buddhist. So I mean, it was pretty. I almost panicked when the time was getting close, and I thought, they expect me to live as a Buddhist monk. We're very strict with the Vinaya rules. You can't handle money or things like this. And living in London with no money, and I don't know one Buddhist. I mean, I knew, one or two, those people that invited me, but how are we going to survive, in a big city that you don't know, you've never lived in, and keeping to the Vinaya tradition. So, anyway, Ajahn Chah, his question, are there kind people in England? And I said, well, I'm sure there are. And then he said, you go then, It was quite a beautiful reflection for me. It was saying, what I picked up was that wherever kind people are, you'll survive. It wasn't saying they have to be Buddhist or whatever. So, living in England's never been a problem in terms of, the requisites, with abundance of food and things, and so it's all just happens through the barami of the Buddha. Through the, I see it all as just the Buddha's wisdom, and trust in that, so that my function is more or less operating through that. And then I can deal with my own personal reactions to it. And by the time I came here, I was pretty clear in how to practice. So some people thought, that I wouldn't survive here. And there were certain movements that I had to go back to Thailand every 2 years to get my batteries recharged because I'd be worn out. But actually, because of the way Ajahn Chah taught, it was so practical that I could use it, just mindfulness, and keep that as my focus. How things affect me. The praise you get, or the blame, or the doubts, or the problems that arise anywhere. Even in Thailand, you've got endless problems there too. So it's never been I've never seen it as a disadvantage or an obstruction, because I already had enough insight by the time I came to know how to use the situation. And there's been all kinds of pressures on me, to change things and do things differently, or and then temptations. You become a kind of representative of Buddhism, and then people want you to spread Buddhism, and you get all these kind of generous offers to almost become a Buddhist lecturer or a missionary, or write books, but according to the way I was trained in Thailand, is just to keep focused on the mind itself, and then to develop the monastic formulas, like the 4 requisites you have. You're allowed to have robes and food and alms food and shelter for the night and medicine. So then that helped me, because I'm brought up in this kind of middle class American style where your mind is trained to always want insurance and security, and so my cultural conditioning is a kind of wanting things to be secure for me, to make me feel safe. And then the whole Buddhist monastic system is about living on the edge of survival. But the thing is, we've been so well received here that we have got a high standard. Which I don't know if it's very good for us or not, but it's like this. It also gives us this sense of confidence, and also my character is. I would describe myself as more like a recluse. Like I like to be alone and privacy, and a hermetic life would be my preference. But then I would, it's on a personal tendency. But Ajahn Chah would never allow me to do that. And I used to really be kind of angry with him, because he was always frustrating these tendencies, and then sending me off here, starting monasteries and things like this was not part of my vision of my life as a monk. But it did help me to deal with my fear of others, my shyness, my wanting to not be responsible for a lot of things. So like just wanting to feeling I'm responsible for Amaravati. That's one of the joys of my leaving. I no longer have this feeling. But I can deal with it. But in another way, it's nice not to have that perception of being responsible for, because it does get into this sense of, on a personal level, I'm responsible. And so I've watched that for many years now, this sense of how I personally react to this sense of being responsible, because on a conventional level I am responsible. Then how, so on a samut satya level, on convention, that's just the way it is. Then in terms of my emotional reactions to this is a certain way. Like feeling burdened by responsibility, or afraid of doing something wrong, or being blamed for things. And through this, then I've been able to watch these tendencies as they arise. And just through this development of mindfulness, I've been able to let go of that, of just those personal habits or karmic tendencies. And it's just like, then you... But now, my retirement, or my leaving here, it's like it just happened on its own. It's not through disillusionment or that, but it seems like the conditions have arisen to where I can leave. It's not like running away or dumping the whole thing on Ajahn Amaro and okay, it's your baby, you sort it out now. But it's like, his generous response to my invitation, and then I do feel like, at my age, I've completed something, that it's no longer necessary for me to be here. And that's an intuitive feeling. And then how I'll be able to live in Thailand, I still don't know, because I'm very well known there, and I'm very senior monk, so I mean, you've got all these things as part of your karma, which make you a focus for a lot of people. Where I just think I'd like to be just like an old frog sitting on a lotus pad. I don't want to be Ajahn Sumedho or anything, or Pope or anything like that. So I want to be like this frog, just the sun's rising, the sun's setting. Yes?
Are there many nunneries in Thailand?
Yeah, a lot, yes.
Just that I see quite an awful lot of monasteries on the websites, but they don't seem to list many nunneries.
Yeah, they do have them. There's some very big ones. And then there's always nuns attached to monasteries.
Long Paul, in terms of the uncaused, uncreated and unconditioned, would it be correct to say that it could be perceived of as an absence? Because you said, well, you can't really perceive these things, but obviously not in a solid.
Well, that's the thing, is that, on a conditioned level, like unconditioned, uncreated, unborn, is a negation of the conditioned, the born, the created. Just in terms of grammar and words. But this is where, and so when we're just caught on the level of words, concepts and so forth, then it looks very dualistic. So you've got the born and the unborn as one opposite to the other. But the skillfulness of that particular way of putting it is that the born can be imagined, forms and color and quality, or and it can be, a fantasy or a cup or a clock or anything else. So forms are, related, the formed or the created, and then the unformed, uncreated is like it's the formed and the created, and the unformed and uncreated are like a whole. they're not opposed to each other, and one's better than the other. But it's just that without the unborn, there wouldn't be the born. And so, without the uncreated, no creation would be impossible. It would be nihilism, annihilationism, destruction. But because of this different, we don't have this paradigm in the Western mindset at all. It's not part of our way of thinking. It's not part of our cultural or philosophical or even religious attitude. But it's very clearly stated in the Theravada scripture. And rather than being opposed to each other, one can't, without the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned, there could not possibly be the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned. But the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned arises and ceases, and then our refuge is in the unborn rather than in the born. So like mindfulness, this ability to be mindful within the limitation of the human form, which is a born form, it's a created form. There is escape from the born, the created, because there is the unborn, uncreated. And so then this is like contemplating that in terms of mindfulness and wisdom, discernment. You begin to tune in, recognize the unborn, uncreated. Like in the teaching of the Four Noble Truths, the third noble truth is really the beginning, the recognition, insight into the cessation of suffering, or into the unborn, uncreated. It's where it's here and now, like the space in the room. It's here and now. It's been here all along, and if there was no space in this room, then we couldn't possibly be here and in it. But because there is space, then the born, the created can come and go in this space. But the space doesn't have any real color or size to it. You think, in this room, but actually the room is in space. The whole monastery, the planet's in space. You take space, where does its boundaries, where does it end? And we can't see the ending, the limitation of space. But without space, we wouldn't be here. And so this is a way of it. So like consciousness is like space. It has no boundary. It's not created by, through ignorance or anything. It's here and now. We're all conscious. Everyone in this room is conscious. And this is like space. The space is, if there was no consciousness, then there'd be no person, no form to be, that consciousness, that would just be impossible. If there was no consciousness, we wouldn't exist. Nothing would exist. So then because of consciousness, then forms can be born, and whatever is born ceases or dies. So this kind of reflection gives us this sense of our refuge is in the unborn, uncreated, or in Dhamma, like the word Dhamma, in the Pali word Dhamma or Dhamma is really the unborn, uncreated, unconditioned, unformed. And it's here and now. It has no boundary. But we may not notice it because we're caught up in, I know this person, that person, the picture of Luang Por Chah, the shrine, Ajahn Sumedho, we go from one thing to the other. And even though we're in the space, you may not consciously notice space till I point it out. And suddenly you're like, oh yeah. So it's not like I've created space. It's not my creation, it's here. And just point to it, and then you suddenly recognize it. It's so matter of fact. And it's what I think, like, I think this is the clearest statement, and you don't hear it in any other, so clearly stated in any other religion. It's implied, though, in religion, but it's not so clearly. And notice that it's not anthropomorphic, or they're not using symbols for the unborn, uncreated, unconditioned. It's not like a deity or a god, or you don't give it a name to give it some kind of personal or some kind of form thing that you could grasp. So it's all put in negations that are ungraspable. Unborn, uncreated, unformed. Well, that gives you nothing to hold on to, but it does. But that's the point. This awakening to that. It's not that you're unconscious and no space, but you may. And the consciousness, as we experience, is always being distorted through our ignorance and our delusions and our conditioning. So even though we're conscious, we experience life through these distorted perceptions that we get through the self-view or the cultural conditioning. And so then we're always looking through a distorted, like a glass, that has all, these mirror houses, you go in and your form changes through distortion, am I this one? This funny looking thing, or am I like that? And then you hold on to the sense of yourself, what you look like from a way of memory, of personal identity, of cultural attitudes about beauty, attractiveness, and then age and identity with the complexion and the size and the shape of the body. And then, of course, it's always if this is what we are, then it's going to be a constant source of suffering, because it's going to change, and it doesn't change for the better. It gets better and better up to a point, then it goes the other way. Yeah?
What is it within us that has the power to reflect?
In Buddhist terms, it's like, it's like something, the human birth, the human form, is considered by Buddhists to be a very fortunate birth. Because we do have this Buddha mind, we're also victims of our conditioning and limited on the species, the human species in most ways. But we also, unlike other animals on this planet, we have the ability to reflect on it, to observe. And this is what you call Buddha nature or Buddha mind or Buddha, So Buddha means the awakened consciousness of a human being. And so that's mindfulness, and these are terms, man-made terms. Buddha is a man-made term. But it is a term that it means awakened human individual. It's not pointing to some abstract kind of possibility of Buddha nature, some amorphous thing governing our lives, but but it's like, it's mindfulness is because of this consciousness and the birth, being born into the human form, is that this is one of the asset, the really important gift that we have as human in this human birth, and that we're not just helpless victims of the species or the form, where, say, the animal kingdom is. They operate from instinct and form, and they operate according to the instructions that's encoded in the form. Now, what's encoded in the human form we have the same instincts, survival, procreation, and that is the animal kingdom. But the gift, the special quality with the human birth is reflectiveness, or Buddha, this Buddha ability to observe. And then the teachings of the Four Noble Truths, these teachings that in the Pali Canon are really just pointers at that, because we do have an intuitive sense of it somehow in us. How many mystics, or what is life about? They always get, what is the purpose of birth, and what is life about anyway, and why was I born, and what's the point of it? And then we're told by religion to, various ways of, we're here to obey and love the Lord and things like that. But that's a positive way of looking at it. It gives a purpose and meaning to our life. But for people that have very skeptical natures, doubters, and critical minds, we don't buy that. That doesn't satisfy me. So the reason why I'm attracted to Buddhism, because it gave me a way of reflecting on my life, in which I can do. I'm good at it. I couldn't do the other as a Christian. I was brought up as a Christian, so I tried to believe all that, but I ended up just feeling incredibly angry, frustrated with the whole thing, and it's because I couldn't believe in the basic doctrinal positioning of it. Where with suffering, I could definitely relate to that, and then the attitude. I like the form of the Buddha. You feel. I really like the Buddhist symbols and the teaching. I could easily understand and use. So it's where, say, my mother and my sister, to them Buddhism makes no sense. Why? My brother-in-law, they were devout Catholics, and but they didn't. They did give me the freedom to pursue this, and so they weren't, disowning me because I became a Buddhist monk. But I think my mother would really prefer me to become a Catholic monk. Yes?
Ajahn, some time ago this summer, one of the monks told me about the sound of silence, and since then I thought, I hear that, and I have since I was a child. And I've become very, very interested in Buddhism. I had no interest before, but I keep coming here, and I've read everything written about the sound of silence. But I wondered if you could perhaps go into it a little bit and how it relates to the deafness, because when I try and meditate, it's just there, it's like an absolute, it's below it all the time. So it's there when I wake up, and before I go to sleep. Now, quite strong now. I sit in temples, louder. It's really interesting to me, but I thought it was originally because I'd had too many motorbikes or something. I don't but it's just there, and I remember it now from a child. From being a child, and I used to get sensitive, and I'd sit down quietly and think, I really enjoy this. I start to be naughty again, and it gets sent to be on my own.
Well, I've used it because it's like in the present moment, it's here and now, and it doesn't have any beginning or end to it, and it's and if you kind of recognize it and use it, it's very, just in itself, it stops just this emotional, random, restless thinking and that I would tend to do if I didn't have that, didn't notice it. So I've used it, and with good result. So what it is, I don't. But it also, I align it with consciousness or the unborn, uncreated, because in terms of using it for practice, that's how it works. putting it in that category, giving it a name, so that you begin to see it as something, that you can easily refer to when you get wound up in your own emotional states or fears and desires and that easily take us over. And then you remind yourself and you go back and you kind of recognize this sound of silence. It's interesting because there's a lot more, like in the London Review of Books or one of those, they have, or the New Statesman or something. Jenny Diskey, I think, is a writer for the New Statesman, or well, in any way, I don't know this woman, but she was reporting on something about silence, and she said she could hear this sound of silence, but somebody told her it was tinnitus. I thought maybe I should send her the book Sound of Silence. And she said something about, she found it very peaceful, it didn't irritate her, but when you give it the name tinnitus, you think there's something wrong with it. And then the things that people were talking about, that stir her up, and she gets into her emotional states. But, it's kind of like, it's not, people, it's generally not recognized. And so I like to use it like just a simile of space, even though it's here and now and all around us and with us wherever we go, we don't give it much attention. And then we claim, say, this is my space, and we take it personally. So, you come up and sit in my seat, I say, you can't sit there, that's my seat, and this space is mine. You get out of here. I'm not looking at the space, am I? I'm looking at this ego that thinks he possesses this space. Because space doesn't belong to anybody. And it's everywhere. It's not that this space is superior to the space you're in. It's the same space. But then we claim it, maybe, this is my space and you're in your space. And that's the delusions we create around the terminologies. But if you just observe space visually, through the eyes, and you can just reflect on, you don't have to make everybody leave but just direct your attention on a wider perspective so that you're not looking at this person, that person, going from one thing to another. So so that's what, we get into looking at this one and that one and this thing. But they're all in space, and so you change from taking your interest in the conditions to the unconditioned space. And then through that kind of practice you begin to feel spacious. Where when you're going from one thing to another, you react emotionally to the different conditions in the space. You like this, don't like that, whatnot. But in space, it's not about liking or disliking anymore. And same with sound of silence. If you call it tinnitus or buzz in the ear, then it sounds like something, like an illness or something wrong, rather than like you found that it's peaceful and it's also here and now, and it doesn't overcome anything. Like you can hear, because it has this kind of flowing continuum. Like I've noticed, like when you're in Chiang Mai, for example, I give retreats there. This place up in the mountains, and it has this waterfall and the stream. It's very noisy, kind of loud, flowing sounds, and you can hear sound of silence behind the noise of the waterfall and the flowing stream. But it doesn't dominate. It doesn't blast out anything. It's behind music and sound of all kinds. So it's not really a sound. The sound comes and goes and changes. So, you listen to Mozart or that kind of classical music. You can hear very plainly the sound of silence underlying the notes. It's a little harder when you get into some of the louder forms of modern music, but it's there. Yes?
When I first heard you speak, you recited a mantra which I failed to write down, and I wondered if you could refresh my memory with something of the likes of infinite oceans of conscious kindness. Or does that ring any bells?
When I started out here?
This was probably 6 years ago.
Forgotten it. So I think I'll retire. Sorry to disappoint you.